Okay, good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us today for today's session. Just a few technical housekeeping items. This is a webinar format, so attendees, you will be in listen and view only mode, which means you don't have access to unmute. They will not see your cameras, but you can ask questions at any time of our speakers today using the Q&A icon that is located on your Zoom toolbar. And with that, I would now like to kick things off by turning it over to Susanna. Susanna, take it away, please.
All right. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Susanna Karras, and I am a Director of Licensing at the Electrical Safety Authority. It is my distinct pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the ESA to the 14th Annual License Holder Meeting. On the screen, you will see the agenda for today's meeting. And as you're looking at the agenda, I would like to say a few words. Being mindful of your time and your busy schedules, we aim to make this meeting informative and brief. I'm very excited to share with you a greeting from Minister Romano from the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services. Unfortunately, he was not able to join us today in person, but I will read his written remarks. They will also be available on the ESA website after this meeting, so you're welcome to check them out as well. Greetings from the Minister Romano. On behalf of the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services, please accept my warm greetings as you kick off your annual license holders meeting. I also offer my very best wishes to everyone participating today. My ministry and I commend the Electrical Safety Authority for your important work as Ontario's electrical safety stewards. We value your expertise and dedication to helping our construction industries weather the storm brought on by these challenging times. As a ministry, we recognize the importance to license, regulate, and educate Ontario's electrical businesses and professionals, and applaud your efforts in maintaining the quality standards for which our province's electrical contracting industry is known. To those electrical license holders in attendance, thank you for your skill and reliability you bring to your work every day, which gives Ontarians confidence in their decision when hiring a licensed electrical contractor. We look forward to continuing to collaborate with ESA to implement and uphold rules that keep us all safe in our homes, workplaces, and communities. Congratulations on your achievements during the past year. I hope your 2021 meeting is a great success. Signed, the Honorable Ross Romano, Minister of Government and Consumer Services. Thank you, Mr. Minister, for your kind remarks. And next, I would like to introduce Josie Erzetic, Chief Regulatory Officer and General Counsel at ESA. Welcome, Josie.
Thanks, Susanna. Here I am. I was just waiting to pop up on everything. Thanks, Susanna. Good afternoon and a very warm welcome on behalf of ESA's executive team and board to the Electrical Safety Authority's second virtual license holder meeting. Thanks for joining us. While we're all missing the in-person interaction, I know that we're adhering to very important public health and safety measures, and that's what will get us through the remainder of the pandemic. Since we're meeting virtually with attendees across the province, I'd like to begin by acknowledging that our meeting reaches across all of Ontario and therefore is situated upon all traditional territories of the Indigenous people of Ontario. I'd also like to thank Minister Romano for his kind greetings and acknowledge the presence of some of our board members, Annette Bergeron, chair of the board, also Arjun Arenja, Adele Mallow, and Gary Oosteroff. In addition, Earl Davison, Vice President Operations, is in attendance. We also welcome staff from the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services, as well as staff from ESA who are in attendance. Next, I'd like to extend special thanks from myself, ESA's executive team, and our board to the ECRA Advisory Council for their valuable insights and contributions throughout the year. Both ECRA and our Contractor Advisory Committee, or COAC, are important safety partners who work with us in support of the sector and in support of maintaining a robust safety culture. I look forward in particular to hearing from Joe Kirby, the chair of ECRA, later in the program to highlight the work that's being done by that council. Finally, I want to take a moment to acknowledge all of the licensed electrical contractors who are with us, as well as those who couldn't make the call today, but for really demonstrating two very important characteristics over the past year. The first one is resiliency. Resiliency throughout the pandemic by demonstrating their service to customers and doing good work that's electrically safe while adhering to all of the public health and safety guidelines. And secondly, for making electrical safety part of everything that you do. We at ESA, as you know, are passionate about safety. It's at the heart of everything that we do. And I know that our LEC community is also very passionate about safety, and it's at the forefront of your decision-making. So in that regard, we want to acknowledge the outstanding work of master electricians who supervise and educate their C of Q holders, as well as all of our LECs. So next, I'd like to hit the highlights of a few initiatives that ESA has undertaken over the last year since we've seen each other. So first, ESA is leveraging technology in order to make things easier for you. And Susanna will be talking to you later in the program about a new online payment portal for MEs, as well as an electronic submission portal for LECs and MEs that you can expect to see in the future. I want to thank Susanna and the entire licensing team for all of their work on these initiatives and others throughout the past year. We've also now completed the first year of our licensing plan. And the aim of that plan is to reduce burden and to bring value to LECs. And as part of that, many of you will know that we've developed and launched the first virtual master electrician exam. So we also have online training programs, which include both synchronous and asynchronous training. The company as a whole has also successfully transitioned to a risk-based approach for electrical wiring inspection. And as a result, we continue to focus our resources on the highest risk installations. Last December, the Auditor General released her value for money review of ESA. We've since been working very closely with our ministry partners and in consultation with our stakeholders, particularly ECRA and COAC, in order to address all of the AG recommendations. Our organization, as you know, is committed to continuous improvement. And we see these recommendations as just that, a way to improve as we continue our journey to be a modern regulator. So, and I just want to reflect for a minute on what does it mean to be a modern regulator? And to us, a big part of that is communicating with you, with our licensed community. We're passionate about safety, as I said earlier, and we're passionate about our LECs. So what we have heard from LECs is that they appreciate forums like this that frankly provide information about what we're doing as a transparent regulator, but also provide answers to some of the questions that you frequently have. So an ever popular part of this event is the Q&A with our technical advisors, which will be coming up later. And last year, you'll recall we had this, and it's what gave us the spark of an idea to launch a podcast. So that podcast is called Grounded in Ontario, and it's made especially for you, our LECs, our master electricians, certified electricians. And the point of the podcast is to impart safety and licensing and other information that's easy for you to access and important for you in your jobs. You can listen to it anywhere you want from your car as you're driving from one job site to the other. But we also direct you back to our website so you can check the bulletins, the drawings, and all of the technical information that we've posted for you, which is available 24/7 whenever you need it. So far, we've created 4 episodes, and these are on pools and hot tubs, EV charging systems, AFCI, GFCI, as well as the underground economy. And today, with your help, we've already reached over 11,000 downloads, and we are happy to keep making that available to you, and we hope it is something that you enjoy. So I invite you to listen, and I invite you to submit ideas for future podcasts. The last thing I want to talk about is the recent ESA Safety Awards event, which was held on September 30th. And I was very privileged to present the Licensed Electrical Contractor Recognition Award to TP Electric. The award was created in order to recognize the extraordinary work of LECs and their contribution to our sector's safety culture. TP Electric began as a one-person shop, and over the past 50 years, they've grown into a thriving family-owned business. And they service municipal, regional, and provincial contracts. So what a testament to their community work and their safety record. So again, our congratulations to TP Electric. Finally, it's my privilege to introduce our keynote speaker. I'm honored to welcome Alan McDonald, who's a master electrician and an LEC business owner working in the GTA. Alan has over 2 decades of experience in our industry. In 2018, tragically, Alan suffered a serious injury due to an electrical explosion. His perspective on safety changed significantly after that injury, as well as a month-long stay in the hospital, followed by a lengthy period of recovery. In fact, after that incident, Alan vigorously enforced a zero-tolerance policy at his business for employees working with live electricity, no matter the voltage. So we're very glad to have Alan with us today to tell us his story and share his important perspective on work safety. Thank you, and Alan, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to thank the ESA for having me. Again, my name's Alan McDonald. I've been a licensed master electrician for 20 years now. I started becoming curious about the electrical trade when I was about 10 years old. I was pulling BX and other things with my dad whenever I can get the chance. Fast forward to today, and I'm now a proud business owner, and I employ over a dozen electricians in the Greater Toronto area. As Josie mentioned, I'm here to talk about the importance of safety. So I've given this speech on this matter several times now, but it's usually in front of doctors, potential donors, others in the medical field, trying to help them raise awareness and money for the burn centers. If I can be honest, I wasn't so sure I wanted to do it this time around. When speaking in front of doctors, there's no need to point out that you made a mistake. But here with this group, I feared being judged by my peers and industry leaders that I respect, but I put that aside because incidents like mine are moments when safety isn't fully considered. They can be life-altering, life-threatening, so why not make it a teachable moment, I thought. In 2018, I was a patient at the Sunnybrook Burn Center for nearly a month due to an electrical explosion. It's a single solitary moment that was burnt into my memory forever. It's fairly uncomfortable for me to be in front of you all today. You're all in the electrical industry. You know the lingo, and you probably share the same values as I do about working in this industry. You all know how dangerous our job is and the dangers of not putting safety first. That's why I know I'm going to have to answer the one question doctors and donors never ask. Why were you working on something live? Well, I'll get to that, and I'll also explain the fallout and the aftermath. You learn a lot of things when a serious incident like this happens to you. For example, did you know an electrical explosion reaches temperatures 4 times hotter than the surface of the sun? It's so hot that the wounds cauterize immediately. And when they call it a flash burn, they're not kidding. It happens so fast, you don't even have time to blink. 13% of my body was burned that fateful day, including my face, my arms, my chest, even my eyes. During my recovery, I also learned that a specialized burn center is not something every hospital has. So I was lucky my accident happened just minutes from Sunnybrook. And when I say specialized, I mean, I was told that Ontario only has 2. So people from other parts of the province, including the northern regions, they have to be flown in. Safety has been something that was always ingrained in me at an early point in my career. I remember my dad teaching me the most essential lesson of all, to trust no one, not even him. I remember my dad asking me to change some plugs out, installing new decoras. He said, I'm going to shut the power off for you. And when he said I was good to go, I grabbed the plug and I got my first shock ever. I was mad. He said, did you test it? I said, no. I thought you said it was off. He said, I thought I told you to trust no one. A few years later, my brother and I were working together for a client and their in-house electricians. They needed a room stripped of all electrical, starting with a 400 amp disconnect. The in-house electricians insisted on shutting and locking out the power to the disconnect, not trusting us to do it, I guess. I'm not really sure, but they shut it down. They came back and they tested it and said it's ready to go. My brother grabbed some tools and he headed for the disconnect. I said, what are you doing? He said, I'm ripping it out. And for what's the first thing Dad ever taught you? I said, oh yeah, right. He said, yeah. So he grabbed the tester and he tested it, and sure enough, it still had power. You just never know. That definitely would have killed him right then and there that day. So thanks, Dad. So the explosion. Yeah, that day started off like any other. I was at one site going over something with one of my clients when another client calls in a panic. We needed to work in a 2000 amp switchgear to attach feeder wires to a service in a strip mall. The client was upset that we needed to shut the power down. We had it scheduled for that night shift, but a well-known coffee shop was giving the landlord a ton of grief over the shutdown. My client said if it couldn't be done live, then we would have to hold off for about 2 months. But 2 months was a long wait for me at this time. My financial stability was really shaky. I'd gone through a few months of general contractors delaying their payments, which meant I was behind on paying my government fees, etc. And eventually my accounts were frozen. It was at the point that even when I was in the burn center, my wife had no gas money or parking money available for her to come down and see me. Luckily, we have really good family and friends to count on. But the government wanted certain amounts of money to unfreeze my account, and this job being held up by 2 months was going to hold up a lot of money. So I quickly ran through all the options in my head, and ultimately I made the wrong choice. Our company safety measures were pretty standard. No working on anything live at high voltages or high amperages. We would occasionally work on live receptacles or switches, maybe even inside a live panel to install a new breaker and circuit, depending on how comfortable our guy was doing it. It was never expected of our electricians, and it was always understood that if they said no, then we would shut it down. We use lockouts, we use arc flash gear, but I guess it wasn't a zero voltage policy. First thought was that this was just too dangerous for any of my employees to do, so I would do it myself. I had everything done, connected, just one side of the panel open. Disconnect was powered up and I was tie wrapping the wires. Then the disconnect faulted somehow. Literally 2 phases blew out to ground right at the fuse mechanism. I heard it blow, but I couldn't move fast enough and the blast routed right out where my hands and face were, just like it was a vent. It punched me in the shoulder, throwing me back several feet. The burns didn't hurt at the time. The wounds cauterized immediately. My sight was blurry. When I stepped outside the room, my shirt was completely gone on the front side. Nothing but the neck zipper left. My employees came running out from elsewhere. They were all staring at me like they'd seen a ghost. I kept saying it's not that bad, but then one of them showed me a picture of myself. My face looked like it was covered in shoe polish. My eyebrows were gone. I had what looked like a piece of plastic stuck to my hand and wrist, but when I ripped it off, turns out it was burnt skin. So it was bad, and we dialed 911. When the paramedics brought me to Sunnybrook, I had my eyes shut the whole time. It was just too painful to open them. I called my wife on my cell to tell her I was on my way to the hospital and that I'd been in an accident. But I said, I'm okay. I was high on adrenaline. So to her, I sounded normal. She thought I was pranking her. It wasn't until the medic took the phone that she believed me. At some point, while laying on the table in the burn center, I took a peek. That's when I first met Dr. Yeski and his team. All I could see were blurs, but there had to be 10 or more of them all around me. They put me out, and when they did, I fell asleep slowly. All the sounds in the rooms winding down to a deaf silence. I really thought that was it. But while I was out, they proceeded to scrape all the cauterized skin away to let it grow back naturally. When I woke, my wife was there to greet me, and thanks to Dr. Yeski and his team, she wasn't as shocked or as afraid as she would have been had she had seen me when I was wheeled in. Over the next few weeks, the team of professionals worked diligently, putting Humpty back together again and kept me informed and thoroughly explained everything to me. The recovery was slow and painful. I also needed skin grafts taken from my leg. But all in all, I was in good hands. I live a good hour or more away from Sunnybrook, so my family visits were not as often as I would have liked, but thanks to modern technology, my wife and 3 girls, they FaceTime me several times throughout the day. In fact, I spoke more to my kids then than I do now that I'm at home. The accident really, like all electrical accidents, was completely avoidable. And I know that now, and I knew that then. But I didn't think it would happen to me. I've never been afraid of electricity. I've always respected it, but I've never feared it. You might think the same way. It still hasn't changed for me, but my decision making has. When I was lying in that hospital bed and I had to see the scared look on my wife's face, my daughters were crying. My friends didn't think I'd ever be the same again. I was so mad at myself for being so selfish. It didn't dawn on me till that moment that I had more important responsibilities. That reality hit me hard. I went into a deep depression. I was having a hard time forgiving myself for putting everybody through this. I was taking my anger out on the people closest to me. But thanks to a stellar recovery team, and notably the mental health therapists at Sunnybrook Hospital, I've come out the other end with a better outlook on everything. I spend more time with my family and my friends. I preach safety constantly, especially with my own employees. We now do have a 0 power working policy. We also make sure to be safe at heights, eye protection, hard hats, and so on. I don't ever want to be standing at the other end of the hospital bed looking at one of my employees. So let's return to that question. Why was I working on something live? My circumstances were dire, but that doesn't mean it was safe to do. I put myself at risk and impacted the lives of those closest to me, including my family and friends and employees. Yeah, I suffered burns, skin grafts, a shoulder surgery, not to mention the mental health it took on me and my family, but that I can and I did get through. But every one of you know that if I'd been electrocuted, I wouldn't be here to tell the tale today. Now, I love being an electrician. I love the problem solving, the puzzles, building new buildings, etc., teaching the young electricians how to do it, teaching them all the tricks of the trade that you can't get in a book. But my biggest responsibility, our biggest responsibility, is to teach them how to do it safe. Not faster, but safer. ESA published a research report in 2016 on the electrical safety practice. The bottom line, working live is a fact. 90% of all electricians have, by choice or inadvertently, worked live. Nearly all electricians are confident they could refuse the work to live with zero blowback from their employer. So that tells you that they're making a choice, that it's one based on a false sense of confidence that it can't happen to them. We need to change that conversation. It can no longer be, how can we do this live and safe? And how can we shut this down and achieve the same goals? That should be part of the puzzle. They should enjoy solving that puzzle too. We're not police officers yet. With a working live mentality, we risk not getting home safe every night, just like they don't. So when you return to work, either this afternoon or tomorrow, I hope you share this story, perhaps a shorter version, with your coworkers and your employees, and have a new type of discussion about safety. Maybe you'll be inspired to revisit procedures and reflect on times you may have been too close to a potential accident. They do happen. But talking about them and safety in ways like this, we can do better and help save injuries and lives. Well, that's it for me. I would genuinely like to thank everyone here today for taking the time to listen to me. I'd also like to thank the team at the Electrical Safety Authority for inviting me. This concludes my presentation. I would now like to introduce Joe Kirby, Chair of ECRA Advisory Council.
Thank you, Alan. I was really touched by your story. I'm an arc flash trainer as well, and it is a very, very sad thing to happen. And I know we do take chances like that, but I wish that we could educate people with situations like yours, because it is a training tool. Thank you, Alan, for doing that. Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to ESA's license holder meeting. My name is Joe Kirby. I'm a licensed electrical contractor and master electrician. I am the chair of ECRA. Next, please. Our advisory council members are made up of the following people: Larry Allison, who's from the Consumer Advisory Council; Vince Gasparis, who is with the Utility Contractors Association of Ontario; Steve Delgettis, who is a master electrician, licensed electrical contractor from OEL; Leo Grillette, who is an appointee by ESA; Cameron Hahn, who is an OEL electrical contractor, as well as a licensed electrical contractor, master electrician. Me, Joe Kirby, I represent ECO, the Electrical Contractors Association of Ontario. Matthew Aston from the Association of Municipal Clerks and Treasurers of Ontario. Larry Shaver, licensed electrical contractor, master electrician, representing ECAO. Brian Smith, an ECA appointee, and Catherine Taylor, an ECRA appointee to the ECRA Advisory Council. Next, please. The Electrical Contractor Registration Agency Advisory Council forms part of the governance structure for the provincial licensing. We involve the electrical contracting industry, the municipalities, the consumer interest groups, the utility contractors, as well as the Electrical Safety Authority. Next, please. We seek feedback to monitor, review, and provide advice and recommendations to ESA on licensing, examinations, and registration of persons or businesses for different types of electrical work in Ontario. Next, please. ECRA Advisory Council's accomplishments. We provide advice on ESA's licensing strategy. The Master Examining Committee, we take feedback from them and ECRA AC input regarding online virtual proctoring of the exam, recommendations on ways to address the underground economy, and a renewal of partnership and support of the Ross Tilley Burn Center of Sunnybrook Hospital. Representing ECRA Advisory Council at ESA Board of Director meetings, met with the Chair of the Regulatory Affairs Committee of the Board, RAC for the acronym, and presented to the Regulatory Affairs Committee also. Providing input and consultations on campaigns. We've had in-depth discussion and feedback on continuing education. That's from the Attorney General's report, Article 17. And we've had substantial work by the Master Exam Committee members on adding 200 new exam questions to the Master Electrician's exam, which was under the Attorney General's report, Article 16. We've been in consultation with the Electrical Safety Authority on the ancillary monetary penalties, which was the Attorney General's recommendation 15.1, and categories of work, the Attorney General's regulation 12. Next, please. Any questions or ideas? ECRA AC would love to hear from you. Please contact ESA Licensing at the electricalsafety.on.ca. Thank you very much, everyone. And I turn the meeting over to Susanna now. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Joe. And I wanted to also say thank you to Alan for his great and very powerful presentation. Before I begin my presentation, I want to take a moment and join Josie and Minister Romano to say thank you to all of the attendees today, and specifically to master electricians and licensed electrical contractors. Ontarians place a lot of trust in you to ensure their homes and their families are safe from electrical harm. So thank you for all the work that you do day after day to help ensure electrical safety in Ontario. So next slide, please. While you're looking at the agenda, I would like to remind you to submit your questions through Q&A, and I see that there's a number that have been already submitted and answered. Given the time limitation, we may not be able to answer all of your questions. What I can say is that we will collect all of the questions, carefully review them, and I will select a few to address in my next licensing corner at the plugged in. So please stay tuned. In addition, I would like to acknowledge the hard work, dedication, and professionalism of the licensing department staff with whom I work every day, and I have a pleasure and honor working every day on delivering services on behalf of ESA. Without these folks, none of the achievements that I will be reporting on today would have been possible. I'm sure you know them and recognize their names as I mentioned them. Shanna Hole, project specialist. Shanna Hole, licensing manager. Scott Eason, project specialist. Cynthia McGill, enforcement coordinator. Andy Nandy, licensing and registration specialist. Kelly Claremont, compliance and complaints coordinator. Chelsea LePage, discipline coordinator. And we also have a customer service representative team. Chantal Madison is a team lead, and we have a number of folks that answer your phone calls and deal with your inquiries every day. Jan Benka, Jody Solomon, Beth Toms, who is retired as of last week, Diana Toms, Jennifer Milne, Christine Small, Lori Cizek, Mark Cizek, and Brandy Miles. I would like to extend my personal thanks to the team for their hard work and dedication. Next slide, please. So over the last year, the team has been working hard on delivering licensing strategic plan actions. Josie touched upon that, the strategic plan. We aim to motivate compliance and reduce regulatory burden. Few examples are on this slide, and I will touch upon them, but please read on at your own time. As you know, recent pandemic-related closures have been a clear indication that things need to change, specifically where we talk about digital services. And we at ESA recognize that, and we aim to provide more digital services to the stakeholders. Last year, we implemented virtually proctored master exam. We offer through that virtually proctored exam a safe, efficient, and convenient way to sit for the exam to the applicants. We will continue to offer in-person exams on limited basis, but we hope that majority of the applicants will choose virtually proctored option and support this digital, important digital initiative. Another exciting project that licensing department is working on in partnership with the IT is the online renewal project. It is a multi-phase approach which aims to provide flexibility, ease, and convenience to license holders, to all of you, in paying for and renewing your licenses. So the first phase is the ME license renewal platform, as you see, and ME obviously stands for Master Electrician. So this is live as of June of this year, and master electricians are now able to log into their accounts, pay online, and do that at any time from anywhere. You no longer need to call, you no longer need to send you checks. This is a fast and efficient way to renew your licenses. Second phase of this project is a comprehensive portal that will allow both master electricians and electrical contractors submit their renewal documents, this time it's documents online, and receive their new license online. This is a large project, so stay tuned for more news as it rolls out, as it progresses. There's also great news coming from training, and you will see it on the side. And this is with respect to also digital or online services. We have been offering pre-master's courses as asynchronous online self-study option, and we have successfully rolled out our virtual instructor-led courses, which is an online or Zoom course where the instructor also appears to take the students through the material. So as you can see, there's a lot of work that has been done by licensing, training, and IT teams to advance digital services to the license holders. Next slide, please. So this is a little bit of a statistics for you. There's some highlights that I wanted to share with you from last year. As you can see, there's been a lot of work done by licensing department staff in processing renewals, new registrations, arranging exams, answering calls, and supporting the license holders with your questions and concerns. Great news I can share is that despite the difficult situation during the pandemic for everybody, difficult economic situation for everybody, we still saw some small increase in the registration numbers. The ME registration was up slightly by 1.4%, and contractors registration was up by 2.1%, the electrical contractors registration. Next slide, please. So the next few slides, I'm going to talk to you about update on the Auditor General recommendations. We do refer to them as AGRs, as you can see here on the slide, and they're numbered the same way as they are numbered in the Auditor General report. So you will see different numbers attached to them, but I will explain what they mean. So one of the key changes that AG or Auditor General proposed with respect to the licensing framework was mandatory continuing education for master electricians. ESA has worked with ECRA, with COAC, Consumer Advisory Council, and we also posted public consultation questions on our website, seeking your feedback on this very important key initiative. Majority of the feedback that we received was in support of continuing education framework. The final decision is with the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services. And if the decision is to implement the continuing education, additional consultation will be posted on the government's website. So we encourage you to participate and provide your feedback as well. Next slide, please. As you can see, there's a number of other recommendations that Auditor General suggested. One of them is AGR 12, or who can do the work. This is the recommendation with respect to assessing the current licensing structure to determine whether master electricians or certified electricians can do some lower risk electrical work without a business license. So that was the recommendation by Auditor General. ESA consulted with the industry, and the feedback that we received was unanimous. The stakeholders did not support allowing non-LACs to offer electrical services to the public. ESA also shares this safety and consumer protection concerns with respect to this recommendation. So the next recommendation is AGR 16, and this is, as Joe mentioned, to add more questions to the ME exam. I'm happy to say that a tremendous amount of work was done by the Master Examining Committee, which is, you see it as MEC. That is a subcommittee of ECRA that worked within a number of people in the working group and created 214, that is a large number, net new exam questions to be added to ME exam bank. This created or made sure that our ME exam bank is robust and strong. And finally, recommendation 20.3, in order to strengthen consumer protection and continue ESA's journey towards becoming a modern regulator, next year we will be bringing targeted consultation to stakeholders on this initiative. This involves offering transparent and fair information with respect to license holders, licensed electrical contractors on ESA platform. So stay tuned. Next year, there will be, as I mentioned, targeted consultation on this initiative. And last slide, please. Looking into the future, ESA and licensing team has been, as I mentioned, busy. You've seen the results of our work. We will continue to collaborate with ECRA and other stakeholders on issues important to the license holder community. We'll continue to target underground economy, and you will hear Cynthia talk about this next. We'll continue to address our compliance and improved safety, and we'll continue to advocate for consumer protection and electrical safety. This has, as Josie mentioned, we're all passionate about safety. My team, you will not see anybody else who is so passionate about safety and consumer, making sure that customer service is provided at the high level and your questions are answered. So we'll continue working with you and for you, and we'll see you next year with more results. This concludes my presentation. I would like to turn the floor now to Cynthia McGill, who will share enforcement activities highlights with you.
Great, thank you, Susanna. Good afternoon, everyone. Today, I would like to provide you with an update on ESA's enforcement activities. In the middle of a worldwide pandemic, ESA was still able to push through and crack down on the underground economy. Let me explain how. Next slide, please. ESA's Regulatory Compliance Program, RCP, was established to proactively undertake activities that identifies those that are performing or offering to perform electrical contracting services without being a licensed electrical contractor. The goal is to identify and follow up on trends related to unlicensed and non-compliant electrical installations and create pilots to address those trends to pursue those operating in the underground economy. At last year's license holder meeting, we spoke about ESA's partnership with Kijiji in the effort to target the underground economy. That partnership has continued and in fact evolved to much more. We're still educating and directing those that post ads offering to perform electrical work without a license, and we're still sending their ads to Kijiji for removal if they fail to comply. This partnership allows us to achieve 100% removal of non-compliant ads from Kijiji, which provides consumer protection, transparency, and education to the public. What we have been doing over the past year is escalate ESA's actions against those that continue to offer electrical contracting services on Kijiji, even after they've been warned and after their ads were removed. RCP staff have been proactively identifying these repeat non-compliant individuals and sending them to investigation and in some cases to prosecution. Approximately 50 investigations are currently active and a total of 6 convictions have been granted by the courts, with many more to come. Our message is clear. Despite some exemptions, only licensed electrical contractors are legally allowed to perform and advertise electrical work in Ontario. And we will seek justice through the court system on those that deliberately and persistently participate in the underground economy. I also would like to share with you the results of the electric vehicle, EV, pilot that ESA conducted this past summer between June and August. As electric vehicles grow in popularity, more people are choosing to install charging stations at their home. Unfortunately, ESA inspectors identified a recent trend of these systems being installed without filing a notification. We focused the pilot on the City of Toronto because that was the area where we noticed the largest number of installations without a notification. The pilot included a public awareness campaign that focused on EVs, reminding licensed electrical contractors to file notifications, informing consumers of the requirements to have the charging system installed by a licensed electrical contractor, to have it inspected and get a copy of the certificate of acceptance. This was also a topic of the episode Grounded in Ontario podcast that ESA recently launched. The goal of the pilot was to increase notifications for the installation of EV chargers. I am pleased to say that the pilot was effective and there was a 23% increase in notifications when compared to the previous 3 months and an 87% increase compared to the same 3 months of 2020. These are great results and it is something that ESA will continue to monitor. Next slide, please. I'd like to change gears now and speak about a couple of recent convictions. As ESA was monitoring Kijiji ads, it was found that the same person was using 3 different electrical contractor license numbers. This was concerning and we took it seriously and launched an investigation. The investigator was able to identify the individual, gather the necessary evidence, and lay charges against Samit Kalia. Mr. Kalia took immediate responsibility for his actions and he pled guilty to make representations and proposed to carry out electrical work without holding a valid electrical contractor's license, as well as holding himself out as the holder of an authorization, which would have been the electrical contractor's license. Mr. Kalia was convicted on September 14th, 2021, and was ordered to a $3,500 fine with a $750 victim surcharge fee. And those victim surcharge fees is intended to help fund programs and services for victims of crime. We believe that Mr. Kalia learned his lesson and that compliance was achieved through this prosecution. The other conviction I'd like to speak about has to do with an unlicensed contractor who was warned in 2016 and then was found again performing electrical work. In 2019, Rumi Ablakim was installing lighting in a recreational center. Investigation was conducted and subsequently charges were laid. Mr. Ablakim pled not guilty, which resulted in ESA's first virtual trial, which was held on September 1st. The Justice of the Peace heard all sides and found Mr. Applicant guilty for not being a licensed electrical contractor and for not filing an application for inspection. Not only did the Justice of the Peace impose a $5,000 fine plus $1,250 victim surcharge fee against Mr. Applicant as the director of the business, but also $5,000 fine plus $1,250 victim surcharge fee against the business. Both of these convictions, as well as others, can be found on our website and in ESA's plugged in. In conclusion, I would like to address the issue of the range of fines. We have heard comments from the LEC community that the fines are low and would not deter those in the underground economy from continuing to commit offenses. Please know that in each prosecution, ESA makes submissions on fine amounts to the court, but the ultimate decision is with the Justice of the Peace, and the court must take aggravating and mitigating circumstances into account. ESA regularly reviews its compliance and enforcement program, as well as minimum fine submissions to ensure that the fines reflect the circumstances of the offense and act as a personal and general deterrent. As you can see from the above examples, the fines vary, with some being larger than others, depending on the circumstance of the offense. In addition, there is a legislative proposal before the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services to add the ability for ESA to issue AMPs directly, which will be another tool to address the underground economy in a meaningful way. This concludes my presentation. It is now my pleasure to pass it over and introduce Boriana, who will provide an update on the Hire an LEC campaign. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia, very much. Good afternoon, everyone. And it is my pleasure to give you a highlight on our ongoing communications campaigns since we spoke last year. Next slide, please. So, Hire an LEC campaign. What have we done since we spoke and seen each other a year ago? One of the key factors was that based on our Auditor General's recommendations, we totally revamped our Hire an LEC campaign to concentrate on homeowners, to concentrate on consumer protection. Before doing anything, we conducted a very extensive survey throughout Ontario, covering different target groups with different age brackets to get very clean and new data. What would be the key messages for the homeowners, whether they're considering renovation, whether they're considering do it themselves work in-house. Based on that survey and based on that research, we found out that there are 4 elements through which a consumer or homeowner goes through in the process of renovation, meaning ideation, thinking about it, information, where do you go to find data, who should you hire, who are the contractors, how do we go about that deliberation and decision. Based on that very robust survey, we revamped our Hire an LEC campaign in this fiscal year. That is very much behavior-based one, and we have created a whole suite of new online videos, advertisements, social media posts that have been posted since mid-September on Facebook, YouTube, Kijiji, Google, Pinterest, our traditional media channels, as well as radio channels. In addition to that, as you can see on the slide, we have created 2 web pages, Finding the Right Contractor and Do-It-Yourself Electrical Work, that highlights the complexity and dangers of doing work on your own and the homeowner's obligations to file a notification work. Next slide, please. If I have so let me share some results with you between September up to date, together with the Homes Group, which we have partnered as influencers to amplify our safety messages. We have produced videos, and we have used the group to share our safety messages about hiring an LEC and how to go with the work through their social media channels, as they have millions of followers. Up to date, I'm pleased to share with you that based on the Homes video, we have had over 5 million views on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We have had more than 7,000 visits to ESA website, and particularly those pages, our social media that are talking about hiring an LEC. For the paid social media, we have engaged online advertisements that have been viewed 48 million times, and we have had more than 250 clicks on the website between May and November. As for the radio ads, some of you might have heard Susanna. She did a number of interviews, and we have had 22 airings about hiring the right professional. We have had more than 88 articles and over 6 million media views in Ontario community newspapers. And we will have still more blogs coming with Mike and Shirley Holmes, targeting younger generations or new homeowners. This is what we have done so far, and I would like to take this opportunity to also thank communication colleagues at ECAO, OEL, our Ministry of Government and Consumer Services, advisory councils who have been using our materials to amplify and share these messages, and we count on your support going forward. So in summary, we have had a wonderful success with this revamped new campaign for homeowners, and we shifted from a seasonal campaign to one that is always in market to align to buyers' intent and understand the difference between licensed electrical contractor, master electrician, and a certified electrician. The last slide, please. So in essence, what does this mean for you? All the information that we are sharing with our homeowners through all the channels that I have mentioned means that they are looking to hire you an LEC. And obviously, here are some highlights on how to ensure that your numbers are visible with the business cards or vehicles, to make sure to follow with clients on certificate of acceptance. And please follow us on our social media. Help us spread the messages, be it our videos, be it our podcasts, be it our blogs, as we have a great following. So now it is my honor to introduce Will Barrett, the General Manager of Operations Planning and Support, who will kick off our question and answer session. Thank you.
Thank you, Boriana. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here today and answer questions submitted ahead of today's meeting. We will not be answering the questions submitted through Q&A live at this time, but we'll try to answer within that Q&A where possible. For all questions we're not able to answer today, we'll try to collect and answer at a later date. One of the questions submitted ahead of time was about residential generators and the residential generator pre-auth program, and when we will be reinstating those pre-authorized connections for residential generators. So there is currently not a scheduled date for ESA to be able to reissue pre-authorized connections for residential generators. We're doing the best we can at the customer service center to pass along pre-authorized connection requests for inspections where contractors are eligible for that pre-authorized connection. With that being said, we're committed to bringing back pre-authorized generator connections as soon as possible for eligible contractors, and are continuing to track and build that eligibility. There was a couple of questions around remote inspections. Is there any future plans for the ability to attach images or PDF files to a notification? Yes, ESA has a project in flight that will address formal remote inspections through the use of photo and or video or live stream. At this time, I'll pass to James Fraser, General Manager of Central Region, to answer a couple more questions.
Thanks, Will. I'll let the screen change. I appreciate the opportunity for being here today. I will answer a couple of questions that came in before today's meeting. And for all other questions, we'll try to answer them. As we collect them and answer them at a later time. One of the questions that came in was, is there any way that addresses can be added in the subject lines for emails regarding inspection status? This request is an additional feature that may be programmed into the automated email response for inspection status. This has been requested as a submission for an enhancement to the IT department, and we will let you know when it's completed. There was also a question regarding why are some of the young inspectors not well trained and have their own opinion other than the code book? All of our ESA inspectors that are recently hired attend a comprehensive training program at the beginning of their career with ESA. This program is called ITP for short and covers all sections of the code as well as other areas of the business. As you know, the OESC is the minimum standard in Ontario for all electrical installations, and we continue to strive for consistency when interpreting the code. Where there are different interpretations of a code rule, it's important to consult not only with the inspector, but you could also speak with the senior inspector or the technical advisor for further clarification. Thank you for sending in your questions. I'll now turn the presentation over to Cynthia McGill, Enforcement Coordinator with the Licensing Department at ESA.
Great, thanks, James. So I've got a couple questions here as well. The first one is, what is ESA doing to address the underground economy and people who are conducting illegal electrical work? ESA takes its role to enforce electrical safety in Ontario seriously. Depending on the risk and gravity of the non-compliance, ESA can take a variety of steps, from informing and educating to prosecution where appropriate. ESA develops and carries out pilot projects with the goal to identify and reduce activities in the underground economy through its regulatory compliance program. So some of those pilots include the Kijiji and EV charger, as mentioned in my presentation earlier. As well, ESA has been working with the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services on an Auditor General's recommendation to implement administrative monetary penalties, AMPs. These penalties are fines like parking tickets, which can be issued for infractions against the regulations. AMPs would sit between taking an education approach to infractions, such as what was used in the Kijiji pilot, and full prosecutions. Amendments to the legislations are working their way through the government approval process, and if passed, will allow ESA to issue AMPs. ESA sees these penalties as an important tool to fight the underground economy and would allow ESA to find those found to be working outside of the licensing system and its requirements. Repeated infractions would be escalated to prosecution, but issuing these penalties is a quick and cost-effective way to address cases of non-compliance. In the case of the Kijiji pilot, if ESA had the authority to issue administrative monetary penalties, AMPs, these fines might have been another tool to use to address the illegal posts. If the legislation is approved to allow ESA to issue these penalties, the ministry will proceed with a regulatory consultation process. Those regulations will provide more of the details about how ESA can administer AMPs, including which type of infractions and how they would apply. This has not been determined yet. And in addition, ESA also maintains an anonymous reporting tool, and we encourage everyone to report an unlicensed contractor at esasafe.com. The other question I had was, can ESA incorporate its inspections with the building permit assessment process? So ESA is working with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing and the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services on an Auditor General recommendation to determine whether ESA inspections can be incorporated into the building permit process. The goal of this work is to address the occurrence of illegal electrical installations. I now would like to turn it over to Susanna Karras, who will have a couple additional questions to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. I have to say, I see a lot of numbers going through Q&A, and we're doing our best to answer them as we go along, but there is a number that is unanswered, so I must repeat what I said originally. We may not be able to answer all of your questions, but we will collect them, and we'll try to pick, if we see themes, to deal with them through the plugged in. I also wanted to take this opportunity and say, if you have questions to ESA, whether it's licensing or wiring, do not wait until the license holder meetings. You can ask those questions or send your suggestions through plugged in, and there is an email there, and you will see it on ESA website as well. And the email that you can use is licensing.matters@electricalsafety.on.ca. That's the email that you will see on the plugged in pages under licensing corner. So please do utilize that. We do monitor the email, and we'll collect your questions through that as well. There's two questions that I can answer out of the list that we received. Number one is, what is going on with Ontario College of Trades, or AUCOT as we know it? So in May 2021, the Minister of Labor, Training and Skills Development announced that the government was creating a new Crown agency named Skilled Trades Ontario, or STO for short. And Skilled Trades Ontario will replace Ontario College of Trades. ESA has been in regular contact with the government, with our government, the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services, and then through them with the Ministry of Labor, Training and Skills Development, to understand on how this migration from AUCOT to Skilled Trades Ontario will work. As of right now, the ministry is making appointments to the Skilled Trades Ontario, outfitting that agency with people who will be doing work as the matters transition from AUCOT to STO. We understand that these appointments will be coming soon, and as of January of 2022, the STO should start operating. As soon as the announcements, and that's our understanding, but as soon as the announcements are public, we will work with our counterparts to establish a strong working relationship and work collaboratively on training and education requirements and all other requirements where we have joint interests. So that's the update on Ontario College of Trades. The second question that I have is, when will code update courses will be provided for the 2021 Ontario Electrical Safety Code? On November 12, 2021, the Minister of Government and Consumer Services approved the regulatory amendment to adopt the 2021 Ontario Electrical Safety Code. It will come in effect on May 5 of 2022. There will be more on this in our technical Q&A. I will focus on the code update courses, the educational activities. So we are planning to provide those in early spring of 2022, next year, ahead of the new code coming into the effect. We plan, and this is planned at this time as we're working as hard as we can on rolling it out, we plan the course registration to open in January of 2022. As for the updated pre-master's course, training solutions team is currently completing an impact assessment to see what changes are necessary to the content of the current course to make sure that the new 2021 Ontario Electrical Safety Code is properly incorporated in the pre-master's course. Once we determine that, again, sometimes mid to end of January, we'll roll out the update and we'll determine the timelines. We will advise you through our website. We have a section on training activities on the website, so please check it regularly as we work through this new code rollout. So these are two of my questions. At this point, I would like to turn it off to technical Q&A. Malcolm and Keith, my understanding, these are the highly anticipated This is a highly anticipated part of our license holder meeting. Keith and Malcolm have been preparing, have a presentation for you, and floor is yours.
Thank you, Susanna. I just, once again, thank you for all the questions that have been submitted. We have a lot of them, and we're going to try to get through as many as we can. I apologize if we don't answer everything, time permitting. In addition to the pre-submitted questions, we have our team working in the background of technical advisors, Keith Bartlett, Trevor Tremblay, Darren Smith, Diana Medill, and from our engineering department, Ray Youssef and Stephen Kelly, all working diligently trying to answer your questions. Later in my presentation, I will show the email addresses and phone numbers for the technical advisors. As licensed electrical contractors, you're able to reach out to us at any time. As Susanna said, you don't have to wait to the meeting. We're here for your assistance. And on with the technical questions. As Boriana mentioned, Susanna mentioned, the code has been adopted for 2021, and it will come into effect on May 5th, 2022. And we have been working with CSA and will be available for purchase in December 2021. And the hard copy is going to be $223, and the PDF version is going to be $199. And this also includes free access to the bulletins on the CSA Communities of Interest. And we also have the EPUB version, which is a digital format for $199 that you can put on your smartphone or tablet. And it's an interactive version that has both the bulletins and the code. So when you go to the code rule, if there's a bulletin on it, it'll highlight and show you that. So keep watching on our website, and more information will become available once that stuff is released. So the top 5 changes in the new code that's coming out, I'll give you a little bit of a teaser here. First of all, there was about 330 subjects for that new code, the Canadian Electrical Code, and there was 217 revisions, 9 approved interpretations, and 104 rejections or withdrawn rules. So the new section that we think are top 5 in Ontario is the new section for farm buildings, housing livestock. These are the 22-800 rules. And this is particularly impactful here in Ontario. It was driven by the Office of the Fire Marshal and the Barn Fire Task Force. And that's what led to this proposal, and it'll clarify the requirements for building housing livestock. There's a new section on energy storage systems. They've been moved into the 64-900 rules as the technology evolves. And amended GFCI requirements for outdoor receptacles, Rule 26-704. This will be a very impactful change. Currently, the code, for the most part, only requires receptacles outside associated with dwellings. So when this rule comes in, it will clarify that if I'm at, say, a community center or, on a street or somewhere like Canada's Wonderland, outdoor receptacles would also have to be GFCI. So it's really increasing safety for everyone in the general public. And there was a new rule, receptacles for mobile structures connected to transfer equipment, Rule 2318. And this was as a result of a coroner's inquest in Ontario, where somebody had needed to use temporary power when there was transfer equipment, and it resulted in a fatality. So this rule attempts to put a receptacle there for workers to use when they're working on these temporary structures. And importantly, here in Ontario, there's an amendment because there was a deletion of Table 39 in the Canadian Electrical Code. However, after review in Ontario, we decided to keep this Table 39 with some modifications. If I do get a chance, I may talk more about this further on. So one of the questions that was submitted, if using an electric vehicle energy management system, EVMS, would a 50 amp breaker and a number 6 copper be acceptable to feed the electric vehicle supply equipment with a nameplate marked as 48 amps? So the answer is no, unless the management system limits the maximum charging current to 40 amps, and that's Rule 14.104. Typically, these systems that we have been seeing, for the most part, are sort of binary on and off. If it does have technology, and I know technology is evolving all the time on this, and maybe it's able to throttle it back or something, then that might be an option in the future. But right now we can just follow with Section 8, specifically 8.104. You have 80% continuous loading, and EV chargers are defined as continuous load. So the loading of a 50 amp circuit is limited to 40 amps, not the 48 amps, so it wouldn't be permitted. In complex residential properties, for example, in 18-room student housing, what are some of the options available for providing smoke alarms as required by the building code? This is an interesting question, because what we're talking about is the number of smoke alarms that I can put on a circuit. And some of the manufacturer's instructions limit the amount of smoke alarms that can be interconnected together. In addition, Rule 8304 may not permit interconnection of a large number of these smoke alarms, in this case 18. So in order to really answer the question, the Ontario Fire Code should be consulted, and perhaps there are other options such as fire alarm systems, but it's not something that ESA can really tell you what sort of system you need to put in. And when we look at that, 8304 limits the number of outlets to 12 on a circuit, unless they're known collected load, known loads. And there's an example here: a combination smoke strobe may have a load of 1 amp. And so you would be limited on the number of devices you could put in there. So obviously 18 would go over that value, and it would be very difficult to interconnect those smoke alarms. And I think that's what the question was getting at. So we do have a bulletin, and as I mentioned, when you purchase the code, you do have free access to all the bulletins, and you can check our website for more information. Bulletin 8-3 clarifies some of the ways that you can wire these types of installations. There's a question about 347 volt lighting, and why is it required to have an identified conductor, often people call it a neutral, when installing switches. And there was a change in the 2018 code for Rule 4022, Subrule 2, that requires the identified conductor to be installed at each location of a manual or automatic control device for the control of permanently installed luminaires at a branch circuit or circuit outlet. And interesting to note on this, the question was about 347 volt lighting, but it really applies to any voltage of lighting. If you're doing 120 volt or 347, the answer would be the same. And this rule came in to acknowledge really a changing technology, where we're seeing a lot more smart devices, web activated switches, motion sensors that require an identified conductor to work. So there was a change in the National Electrical Code that also did this, that required the identified conductor to be installed. And the Canadian Code, there was a proposal in the Canadian Code harmonized with this. And this is to prevent people from, when they go and hook up the switch later, they don't have the identified conductor there, and they may just end up thinking they can get away with connecting the white wire to the back of the box. So this was sort of a, we see the technology going that way, and it's providing an option for in the future. We do, again, have a bulletin on this on 4-15, and we actually provide an easement. So if you're using a raceway and you're able to pull that cable in later, then you're not required to put it in at time of use if you don't need it. When replacing an existing non-GFCI split receptacle located in a kitchen, is a GFCI protected receptacle required to be installed as a replacement? So no, notwithstanding. So that actually means, yes, it is required to be installed, but we've published in our bulletin 2629, notwithstanding this, GFCI protection shall not be required, as the split receptacles are not available with GFCI protection. But sometimes it's desired to bring that level of safety. And I know when I was doing inspections, many times people would actually install the GFCI ahead of time because they thought that was what was required. And then we would go in there and find out they'd actually reduced the circuit capacity. So this bulletin and associated flash notice was added to our website, and it gives you an option. And you can see here, if you want to improve safety, you can put a GFCI at each location and put a dedicated circuit. Use the red, say, for the first one, mirror the wires, and put the black circuit at the second one, and have your 2 GFCIs each as a dedicated circuit. It's certainly a way to increase safety. However, we will not be writing a defect if it's an existing receptacle and you're going to change out a old style receptacle to a Decora style receptacle. Few common defects. We get this quite a lot, and I believe this was just pulled down from our computer system last week. And the top ones last week were armored cable for anti-shorts. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. I'm not sure why people think they can forget the anti-short. Very common. 1 conductor per single lug. I think this one is often misunderstood because there are lugs that are approved for multiple wires. So some panels you can go into and it's shouldered and you can put a wire on both sides of the screw, but other panels only accept a single conductor. So we're using rule 2304 because it's by manufacturer's instructions. Accessibility of junction boxes. This is all about the buried junction boxes. If you're doing a renovation and you don't bury the box in the ceiling so there's not access later if there's a problem or you need to service it. And then rule 26656 AFCI, and I will talk a little bit about AFCI a little later in the presentation. Required for branch circuits. I mean, this rule has been around for a while. I think it started in the 2002 code, and there was major changes in 2015 for AFCI. No current changes on this, but it's still misunderstood and still missed, so it's still quite high on our defect list. And 10606, reducing washers bonding. And we're going to talk about this one a little bit more as well. This was a change in the previous code and probably why it's high on the defect list. When you're using the reducing washers, or as we call them, donuts, before we used to accept them as bonding, but the code changed and clarifies it. Hey, if I'm going down from say a 1-inch knockout down to a 1/2-inch knockout, I now have to put a grounding or a bonding bushing on there to bond the pipe if I'm using that as my bonding method. The next question we had was about millwork with built-in receptacles. So in this case, the submitter asked about IKEA cabinets, and we've seen a number of different things on the market. And if that cabinet comes with a built-in receptacle and it plugs in somewhere, that would require a certification mark on the overall product. And if that's approved as an overall product and it's plugging in, then the receptacle would be required to be in there. But if it was not an approved product and you're installing it in as an installation, then the requirements of 26720H would apply for things like appliances suitable for installation in the enclosure, dishwashers, heaters, garbage disposal units, and similar stuff, a microwave oven, or if you had an appliance, it would have to have a switch on the door that de-energizes the receptacle when the door is closed. Obviously, the intent of this is not to have a sort of heating or cooking appliance in a cabinet and closed in and causing a fire. For lighting, under cabinet lighting, it's permitted to remove the cord caps and hardwire that cord into the junction box in the cabinet space, but don't bury it. This next slide is about clarity for the running board distance from wire. So we do have a pretty good bulletin on this. And it shows where the receptacle, or sorry, where the wire has to be in relation to the running boards. And you can see if I'm in this area, I don't need any protection. And if I'm running in the basement, if I'm beside the joist, I don't need any protection, or this could be a beam. However, if I'm in an open area, I do need mechanical protection. But I believe this question was specific to how far away can I put this wire from this running board? And right now, I believe inspectors are using judgment to see if it's protected. But the good news is there is an update on this rule in the 2021 code, and we'll be starting training on that. So stay tuned on that, and I think it'll get a lot clearer and make a lot more sense at that time. So the next question is about 24 volt DC, safety sensor switches on machines required. Do they require mechanical protection? So first of all, if there's wiring on a machine, typically that machine is covered by an overall approval, and it would probably be under the product standard and not really the wiring inspector that's looking at it. But if you were doing wiring with 24 volts, depending on how you're using it, if it's a class 2 circuit, it would fall under section 16 and class 1 circuits. And class 2 circuits are exempt from the requirements of section 12. However, if it's a class 1 circuit or a class 2 circuit that is required for safety and control, then it would require additional protection. So as mentioned, here's those reducers or donuts we talked about. Somebody asked about the grounding bushings required for residential wiring. And here's some of the most common locations. At the service entrance, we have the bushing here, and then we have the conductor size per table 16. Anybody that's been around for a while knows this used to be table 41, but there is no longer a reference to table 41. So it's clarified now that it's table 16. When you have non-metallic boxes, if it was a single conductor, we typically say as long as it's bonded at one end. So in this box here, if it was, say, an armored cable coming from a metallic box, we would be okay. However, if there was multiple connectors coming into a non-metallic box, then it would be required to be bonded together. And again, the reducing washers, as we talked about previously. So questions about reduced neutral wires on the main service and what's the benefit of that? So we have the rule that says the neutral has to have sufficient ampacity to carry the unbalanced load, and the maximum unbalanced load shall be calculated as determined by section 8. When installing electric discharge lighting or nonlinear loads supplied from a 3-phase 4-wire system, the neutral shall not be reduced. Some examples of nonlinear loads are loads that include dimmers, computers, microprocessors, and other electronic loads. So what's the benefit? We do have bulletin 4-3-9, and you can reduce the neutral size on a service. For example, here we have a 200 amp service with 2-aught copper, and number 6 would be the bonding size, and which would also be the neutral size. So in some cases, when you want to reduce the conduit size, or there may be some cost savings, there's a big advantage to the installer. So there was a few questions on arc fault, and I have a number of them here. The first one was, explain why a GFCI circuit also needs to be on an arc fault breaker. So in addressing this question, I went back to the definition of what's trying to be accomplished. So arc fault protection is a means of recognizing characteristics unique to both series and parallel arc faults and de-energizing the circuit when an arc fault is detected. And ground fault circuit interrupter a ground fault circuit interrupter that will interrupt the circuit to the load within a predetermined time when the ground fault current is 6 milliamps or more, but not when the ground fault current is 4 milliamps or less. So what does that all mean? Go to the next slide here. With arc fault, we have series and parallel arc faults. And what that means here on the series, if I have a break in the wire, the arc fault breaker can detect that break in the wire and that arcing. That arcing can create a fire, however, may not draw enough current to operate the overcurrent device. So the AFCI device can detect that and prevent the fire. And the same thing with the diagram on the left, we have parallel arcing. And the microprocessor and the arc fault breaker is supposed to be able to detect that fault and interrupt. When we look at ground fault protection is really about the protection of people. So here's a Class A ground fault, and I just have a simple circuit here, a power supply and a receptacle. So what a ground fault receptacle in this case, or it could be a breaker, is they basically have two current transformers and they compare what's going out to what's coming back. So if the person was to touch an energized portion, and because they're standing on the ground, they're also grounded, they could potentially be electrocuted, whether this is by the pool or at the bathtub or these new receptacles that we're talking about at outdoor facilities. There's a potential for electrocution. This current transformer looks at this fault path and says, hey, the current's going somewhere else and it's not going back on the wire. And if there's a small difference there, it will trip and protect the person. So really, the reason why sometimes you need both requirements, for example, an outdoor receptacle, the outdoor receptacle needs ground fault to protect the person, and it needs AFCI or arc fault to protect the wiring between the receptacle and the panel from electrical fire. The next question was arc fault breaker placement reasoning. What I got from this question is, why does the arc fault have to be at the panel or at the first device? And the reason for this is that by placing the arc fault at the first device or at the panel, the first device would require enhanced wiring methods. It is able to interrupt any fault downstream from parallel or series faults. If my arc fault device was at the last receptacle and I had, say, rodent damage or something back here, the device would not be able to interrupt the fault. Can ESA push manufacturers to stop making receptacles that allow push-in connections, as it appears to create unwanted tripping for arc fault breakers or AFCI breakers? AFCI, the receptacles are approved and tested to the standard for use with copper conductors with push-in terminations. And if you have some sort of failure, then you should report it to Health Canada and they can investigate that. Changes to products are usually based on failures or fires or proposals, but at this time, we haven't been seeing them. So in order to affect change on that, you would need to report the issues that you see, and that would allow future change. And that's not just limited to receptacles, any electrical product. If it's a consumer product, you can report it to Health Canada. If it's not a consumer product, say like an industrial facility, you can report it to the Electrical Safety Authority, and our product safety group can go through the product incident process. Why existing basement unit need arc fault breakers? Arc fault breakers are only for new construction. So the question is, okay, I have an existing basement, or I'm doing the basement. The rest of my house doesn't have arc fault protection, but hey, now I'm renovating my basement, or I'm adding a new circuit. Why do I have to add arc fault protection? And the rule 26656 actually requires arc fault for new branch circuits. So that's a rule. When I'm running a circuit, I follow the new code. We do have some examples in Bulletin 2629 where maybe it's an existing installation, not so much for arc fault, but basically if, whenever ESA is applying the code, when you're running something new, the current code would apply. And here's an example of when you're extending the circuit. So if I'm running that whole new branch circuit from the panel, I would have to have that AFCI, as we previously talked about, either the breaker in the panel or at the first device with enhanced protection between the first device and the panel. Here in this case, I'm going to add an additional receptacle onto a new circuit. And what that does, the code permits an AFCI receptacle now to be added at the first device. And I don't have to protect these existing receptacles, although because that's existing. And this is the new portion of the installation. It is recommended, though, you may want to put that at the first device. That's certainly added safety benefit for your customer, whether you go with a breaker or a receptacle at the first device. But we don't require enhanced wiring between the existing installation and the new installation. Why is arc fault breaker code still in effect for appliances with motors, especially washers, which trip very often? So there's been a lot of discussion about this, and we have been engaged with the Electro Federation, which is the Association of Manufacturers. And they are noticing that arc fault breakers are tripping some washers and microwaves. So again, this was a question. There was actually two questions here. I apologize. Arc fault breakers are tripping some washers. Is it possible to eliminate that? So when we reached out to Electro Federation, they told us that these breakers, the standard requires them to have over 20 tests for nuisance tripping. But it's a little bit of a cat and mouse game as the products are released, the products such as washers and microwaves, they're changing every 6 months, where the breaker design may be only changing every year. So every time they add new signatures, a new product comes out and it doesn't get added into the breaker. So Electro Federation, when we've been talking to them, they have been working right now primarily on microwaves and washing machines, trying to work with the manufacturers to see if these signatures can get added in at time of production so that they aren't affecting this. This is an ongoing process. I know that it probably is not an easy answer to swallow all the time. So there are other options when you do run into problems. First of all, an arc fault breaker is an important safety device, and ESA is not in a position right now to carte blanche say you don't have to install them. So you should follow the code and install the device. If you do have problems, it's required that you do troubleshooting before you come in and submit an occurrence. So you can go to our website, or you can just Google ESA AFCI. You can go to our website, and there's a form that you can put in with Electro Federation. And you put in all the information, the AFCI, the model, the serial number, the length of the run, all this information. And once that's submitted, in general, the manufacturer will try to work with you and see maybe there's a different firmware or there's some other sort of troubleshooting that they can do from the manufacturer's perspective. However, we can accept the deviation for a non-AFCI device on a dedicated circuit feeding one duplex receptacle once the customer provides an email record that they have identified the issue and are dealing with the nuisance tripping. So basically, if you're having this tripping washing machine or microwave, go to our website, fill out the form. Once you've filled out the form, you can apply for the deviation. Once you have that email record and the contractor declares there's no improperly wired circuits and the deviation is signed by the contractor and the homeowner. So you contact your inspector or technical advisor and we can get you the form as we work through this process. All right, we're doing quite well for time here. So as mentioned before, here's our current technical advisors. Again, you'll be able to get a copy of this presentation later, but don't wait till the license holder meeting to reach out to us if you have technical questions. You can email or call us. Email is great for us. We're always doing multiple things on site with contractors and inspectors and training. Sometimes we're on the phone and sometimes we're not. So either way, we will get back to you. And here's the phone numbers and email addresses for us. And we look forward to hearing from you. I do have a couple more minutes, so I can give you a little bit more of a preview of some of the new codes that are coming out. So here's some 10 major changes in the code. New climate change adaptation project, electrical equipment exposed to the ingress of water was part of this, and electrical installations in flood hazard zones. So there's some new rules, we'll talk about that. Cables and roof decking systems, and a control option to limit the input and output currents for the interconnected systems. This is energy storage systems and PV, and a new single disconnecting means for 2 or more electric vehicle supply assemblies. New interconnected smoke alarms, in addition to a dwelling unit created by a subdivision of dwelling units. We were sort of touching on that earlier with the 18 smoke alarms, but this is when you divide a dwelling up. There's clarified requirements. We did have a rule already, a bulletin published on this, and we did submit a proposal, and eventually the code did come very close to what our bulletin is saying. New control trace heat sets and heating panels in adjacent rooms. And this is an interesting one, deleted luminaires and control in residential occupancies. This is the 3500 series of rules. So these are the rules that say, hey, you need a light switch, a 3-way switch on a stairwell. And the problem with these rules is that they were also in the building code, and they were in the electrical code. So you had 2 people enforcing the same code. So it was decided that the electrical authorities having jurisdiction would step back and allow the building department to enforce those rules. And there's amendment for non-metallic sheath cable in plenums. This is a table 19. I believe this is just a clarification reminding you to look at the building code requirements when running wires in plenums. And protection of cables in non-concealed locations, 12514. So I have a couple minutes here, so I will show you a few more slides. This is the farm building that we talked about. And where this came from, as I mentioned earlier, was from a task force from the Office of the Fire Marshal, where we were looking at fires in buildings housing livestock. And OMAFRA did some studies, and amongst some of the other stakeholders, as to the environment, whether, you know, is it category 1 location or category 2 location, where both locations would interfere with the proper operation of the electrical equipment. And through those studies, it was found that even when you had a lot of ventilation in these buildings housing livestock, this category 1 and category 2 location still existed, because the temperature control or environmental systems, for the most part, responded to the temperature and not the amount of humidity or corrosive gases in the air. So this rule was changed to clarify that buildings housing livestock shall be considered both a category 1 and a category 2 location, unless a deviation is granted. And this was added in there because there is thought that there is technology that at some point will be able to respond better to these corrosive or wet atmospheres and adjust the atmosphere based on those conditions. I do know that during the testing, the probes that they were using to monitor this area were deteriorating so fast they could only do one test with those monitors. So there is still work to do on it, but the code does sort of address future things there. And the electrical equipment has to be suitable for the location, except specialty type of equipment and ventilation fans. So this was really in consultation with the industry. There's some specialized equipment, for example, a robotic milker in a dairy barn. It may not be exactly designed for a corrosive environment, but the manufacturer does make it for a livestock area, and it has a lot of monitoring and that sort of stuff. So this was giving industry time to adapt to these new rules. And all connections are to be corrosion and resistant type 4X. So look at this plug here. And this is very typical when we go into buildings, housing, livestock, and we see fans plugged in, and the corrosion gets into these devices, and they cause fires. So the new code is going to clarify that if I'm putting in this device, it has to be a corrosion resistant type device for these areas. So it'll have something like a nickel coating inside the blades. Here's the slide for the GFCI requirement outdoors. And here's an example here. You know, previously I could have an outdoor refrigerated water fountain at a community center or something, and you would think the receptacle had to be GFCI, but in fact, there was no specific requirement. So this has been amended to clarify that, or you needed a receptacle outdoors for power washing, doing all kinds of work, it would have to be GFCI. And one of the other major changes that's part of this is there previously was an exemption for vehicle heater receptacles, and they're no longer exempted from GFCI. And this clarifies with the National Electrical Code in the US, where a lot of people were coming back and saying, yes, you know what, when I plug into my vehicle heater outdoors, it's tripping the GFCI. And the response was the reason why those vehicles are tripping the GFCI is because there's a ground fault in them and they need maintenance. And so we have seen a number of failures and fires where there was not ground fault on these vehicles. So this is a positive change. It may take some getting used to, but it will be incumbent to do maintenance on your vehicle now if you want your vehicle heater to operate properly. This is the energy storage systems, marking requirements to indicate buildings with ESS. This is already a requirement in Ontario, but it just went into these new rules in the 64-900s. A requirement for disconnecting means, including disconnecting means for self-contained ESS. So this would be something like your Tesla Powerwall. Requirements where ESS could be located and separate from structures and equipment. So there's all kinds of new rules here in 64-900 regarding energy storage system. And we've been having a lot of discussion on this in the regulatory department, and please take the code training and look for a bulletin on this section because we have a lot of valuable information on that. And I previously mentioned this was a receptacle for mobile structures connected to transfer equipment. This was a facility or a container where they went to go and do some work, and they needed to plug in some power tools. Although the generator ran the lights in the facility, it did not run the receptacles. So what happened, there was a modification to the wiring made. And as a result of this modification to the wiring, there was a fatality. So there was a coroner's report, and the coroner recommended that for these types of structures, that there be a receptacle for temporary power for workers to use in there. And that will prevent people from having to mess with the electrical system when they just need to plug something in. And as I mentioned before, Table 39 was deleted from the Canadian Electrical Code. So if you look at the 2018 code, before you used to be able to use number 4 copper or number 2 aluminum. And the 2021 code you would actually have to use number 3 copper or number 1 aluminum. And the same thing for the 200 amp services, your 2/0 copper or 4/0 copper, and your 3/0 or 250 aluminum. So there's a number of things there. And there was a lot of discussion in Ontario. We've been using these sizes for many, many years without incident. So there was no real technical rationale for deleting this. There was some problems with this table 39. I'll show you the new one here, where you'll notice the 89 amp service has been taken out. So there was some conflicts with table 39, and all the 60 amp row has been deleted. It's no longer required. And I apologize for my dog. Here there's number 3 previously and number 2 for the 90 amps. So there's no change here, but we're still going to permit number 2 for the 100 amp service. And all these are the same. You have to use 90-degree conductors. And before, these numbers were juiced up with a 5%, where now you can look at that size. Loads calculated in accordance with the applicable rules in Section 8 are permitted to be exceeded by 5%. And again, that's an Ontario amendment. The 5% rule was deleted from the Canadian code. And this is added value for the contractors. Let me show you why. If we would have deleted this table, and I tried to do a little bit of a cost analysis. And what I did is I included 3 service conductors, 2 meters in length, 2 lengths of PVC conduit, 2 TAs, and an LB. So on a 100 amp service copper, there was no change. But on aluminum, where previously I was allowing number 2, if I was to go to the new code, which was 1 1/4 inch conduit, if I went to the new code, I'd have to go up to 1.5 inch conduit. So in addition to the cost of the wire, which was kind of minimal, you'd have to go to 1.5 inches. And when I priced out at the supplier, you were better off to go to a 2-inch conduit, because 1.5 inch conduit was very expensive. So the increase from $52 to $85 was a 38% increase it would have costed if we didn't maintain this Ontario amendment. And the same thing for the 200 amp service, where we had 4/0 conductor, and we used to go to a 2-inch conduit. And if we went to 250, you'd actually have to go to a 2.5 inch conduit. And again, when I called the supplier, they said, well, you'll have to go with 3, because even if I can get you 2.5, it's going to cost you a lot more. And that would have been a 78% increase in cost. So these are significant. As I said, we've been using these sizes in Ontario for many, many years without incident. So we decided it would be in everybody's interest to maintain status quo with that. And electrical installations in the flood hazard zone. This is what we talked about. The service box shall not be located in areas below the flood elevation. And the new rules require the branch circuit located below grade in areas designated as flood zones to be provided with ground fault protection. And a new rule 26712 requires for buildings and flood zone sump pump receptacles to be located above the flood elevation or to be marked as suitable for submersion to allow the sump pump to continue running if the basement gets flooded. There's work to be done on this, as the authority having jurisdiction need to establish a process on how to identify where the flood hazard zone is and the flood elevations, as well as the electrical contractor. When they're doing the installation, they should be aware that there's a flood zone there. So lots of work to do on that. The roof decking systems, we had this requirement in Ontario that said you could not run in the embedded roof. And this was actually changed into the Canadian code with a little bit extra, saying you can put class 2 circuits in there, or you can put embedded heat tracing, but a warning label is required. This rule 64112, and this is regarding distributed energy such as solar PV or energy storage systems. And we currently have a rule that for dwellings that limits you to exceed the panel board bus rating by 125% in dwellings and 120% in other places. The technology is constantly evolving, and now they have systems that can monitor the bus bar and throttle back the output of the distributed generation. So when you have a system like that, this rule will actually permit you to exceed the bus rating. New sub-rule 3 for electric vehicle supply equipment, 86304, permits a single disconnecting means to control 2 or more electric vehicle supply equipment assemblies by the same branch circuit. We already permitted this in our bulletin 86-1. And control for heater sets and heating panels in adjacent rooms. So this is a good clarification that this new sub-rule is added to permit trace heater sets and heating panels to extend into adjacent rooms to be controlled by a single temperature control device. This is already permitted in our bulletin. So this is pretty typical where you can see a room that has heated floor in 2 rooms, where you might have the water closet in one area and you might have the shower area in another area, and the code really didn't permit you to have that heating area in here and that heating area in here controlled by the same stat. So this code rule was added to clarify that this is now permitted in accordance with our bulletin as well, which you can do right now. And luminaires and residential occupancies, as I mentioned before, all these lighting rules are deleted from the Ontario Electrical Safety Code because it is in the Ontario Building Code, and it would be up to the building department to do that. And I'll just show you this rule, protection in non-concealed locations. There is some rules coming out about that, about running in between guard strips. When we looked at the previous slide, it was only adjacent, where now you can use guard strips to put it in the side or run it on the side of the running boards. It really clarifies the protection requirements for all the exposed areas, and it harmonizes with 12.518 by clarifying that cables are required to be protected from mechanical damage when they're less than 1.5 meters above the floor. With that, I thank everybody for your time, and I would like to send it back to Susanna.
Well, thank you very much, Malcolm and the team. I know a lot of work has gone into this presentation and answering questions. I can also say quickly, as we coming to the close of our meetings, of our program, our meeting today, we have answered live over 60 questions. We have, and the team in the background has been answering your questions, and they've done a fantastic work. There was a question as to how many attendees were logged in at the height of the program. I can see, I personally saw a number. As the number changes, people log in and log out. We had 415 attendees logged in. Some were panel members, and majority was obviously you folks on the program, on the call today. So thank you very much. This has been great to have you all to have interest in license holder meeting. We do hope that it has been useful and helpful, and you learned something today and receive information that you were looking for. If you have any questions, as I mentioned, and many of us mentioned, concerns or require additional information, please don't hesitate to contact us through our website or through contacting the call center, or you can email, as I mentioned, licensing.matters@electricalsafety.on.ca. Recording will be posted on ESA website. I wanted to thank everybody who, all panelists who participated, everybody who supported at the back end, our Zoom partners, and everybody who attended today. Thank you very much. It's been great having you today, and until next time, have great, safe, and fun holidays all, and stay safe.